Long before the arrival of Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism, the Turks and Mongols had their own faith, which is difficult to compare with anything familiar to us. It was born not in temples or cities, but in the life of nomads, among the wind, the earth, and the sky, under which they spent their entire lives. This faith later became known as Tengrism. At its center was always Tengri, the eternal blue sky on which, as the nomads believed, the fate of every person and every ruler depended. But Tengrism is not only about the sky, it is also about the spirits of nature, ancestor worship, respect for horses, the earth, and fire. It is an attempt to explain a world where everything is interconnected and where a person is responsible for the harmony around them. Many people consider such beliefs primitive, but that's not the case at all. Greetings! You are on the Amazing History channel, and today we will discuss what this ancient faith was like and why it had such a strong influence on the Turks and Mongols, and how Tengri became the very sky under which entire states arose and the greatest conquerors of Eurasia emerged. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our viewers and sponsors, as usual, for supporting the channel.
И возможность создавать.
Well, now let's get to the topic of this episode. Let's get started. When we started to look into Tengrism, the main problem we faced was the lack of sources. After all, nomads didn't have the habit of writing down their myths and beliefs. Elders passed all this down orally to the younger generation, and shamans to apprentices through songs and rituals. That's why everything we know today is a combination of archaeology, later Turkic inscriptions, and descriptions from neighboring civilizations. To put it mildly,
На степняков со своей колокольни.
Chinese chroniclers, Persian historians, and European travelers only saw part of the picture and interpreted it in their own way. Because of this perception, Tengrism was long considered a form of shamanism, as if the entire spiritual life depended only on shamans. But findings from Kazakhstan and Siberia show the opposite. Rituals were performed by ordinary members of the clan as well, while shamans were more like specialists who were consulted in special cases, such as divination, illness, or making important decisions. But despite the lack of direct sources, we can draw a fundamental conclusion that the early Turks and Mongols really did have a common worldview system, where the main deity was the sky, Tengri, and human life was understood as part of a greater natural order. From these scattered pieces of evidence, we reconstruct what the steppe peoples believed before world religions arrived. The Turks and Mongols had a clear understanding of the world and how it was structured. As I mentioned before, at the very center of this worldview stood Tengri, the eternal blue sky. This was not a god with a specific biography, but a force that governs the order of things. After all, for nomads, the sky is not just the space above their heads. It gives life, luck, power, and victory. If the Khan ruled justly, it meant Tengri supported him. But if the state began to collapse, the explanation was simple. The sky had turned away from him. Other forces stood alongside Tengri. The most famous of them was Umai, the protector of children, family, and femininity. In Mongolian versions, she is often called Mother Earth. She was associated with fertility, family protection, and the continuation of the lineage. Besides them, there were also spirits of the elements. For example, the spirit of fire was considered the guardian of the home hearth. There were spirits of water, rivers, spirits of mountains and forests. Well, that's pretty clear. There were also guardian spirits of places that should not be disturbed without necessity. For nomads, the world was inhabited not only by people, but also by many invisible entities. A person lived among them, and it was important to maintain harmony. If you offended nature, you would get sick or have bad luck. If you performed the ritual correctly, the path for your clan would open. Horses held a special place. They were more than transportation. They belonged to the spiritual world. The owner of the horse was responsible for its well-being, and the horse in turn was believed to be able to carry prayers to the sky. That is why horse sacrifices are found in almost all ancient Turkic burials. It is important to note that Tengrism was not a single rigid system. Different regions had their own variations and local supreme gods. For example, among the Altai and South Siberian Turks, the figure of Ulgan appears, a benevolent creator dwelling in the upper heavens. He was revered as the creator of order and the patron of goodness. He did not replace Tengri, but existed within local traditions that developed separately from the steppe empires. Such regional differences show that the faith of the Turks and Mongols was very lively and flexible. The Turks and Mongols did not have a single set of myths like the Greeks or Scandinavians. Stories were passed down within clans and tribes, therefore the versions differed, but the themes were common. And one of the most important is the origin of the people from a sacred animal. The most famous Turkic legend is about the she-wolf Asena. It tells the story of a boy, the only survivor after his clan was destroyed. A she-wolf finds him, takes care of him, and from their union the ancestors of future Turkic tribes are born. For the ancient Turks, this story was not just a fairy tale. The wolf symbolized strength, cunning, and the ability to survive. In general, all those qualities that were valued on the steppe. And descent from the she-wolf explained why the ruling clan had the right to rule. The Mongols have a similar motif, the blue wolf and the doe, from whom, according to the secret history, the lineage of Chinggis Khan originated. These images made the Khan's power not only political, but also sacred. After all, the ruler is a descendant of beings connected with the sky and nature. Besides wolves, other animals also played a key role. For the Turks and Mongols, each species had its own
свой образ и характер. Например,
the horse symbolized luck and was a guide in the world of spirits. The deer represents purity and nobility. The eagle is a celestial force, and the bear and the snow leopard are guardians of the land and the clan. These animals appeared on clan emblems, banners, ornaments, and weapons. They were not just totems, but a reminder of the connection between humans and the surrounding world, where every creature had a spirit and could either help or harm. The cult of ancestors held a special place. Each clan had its own sacred stories connected to real ancestors, great warriors, shamans, or khans. They were depicted, remembered during festivals, and offerings were made to them. Ancestors were seen as intermediaries between people and the sky, and their help in hard times was as important as that of spirits. We learn about what the early Turks believed not only from myths, but also from stone. In the 8th century, inscriptions appeared in the Orkhon Valley, carved by the rulers of the Second Turkic Khaganate. These are the first major texts in the Old Turkic language, and they show surprisingly clearly what role Tengrism played in politics. The ruler Bilge Khagan talks about his victories, defeats, and how he restored the state. But most importantly, he constantly emphasizes that everything he did was only possible by the will of Tengri. That is, for him, Tengri is not some abstract sky, but a force that appoints and removes rulers. In the inscriptions, there are phrases like, Tengri raised me, Tengri granted victory, when Tengri wished, the people rose again. For the Turks, this was not just poetry. It was a political reality. The Khan was not just the leader of the clan, but a person who received the support of the sky. If he loses the support of Tengri, he loses the state as well. That's why the outcome of any event, from war to rebellion, was explained not only by human reasons, but also by how the sky viewed what was happening. It's no coincidence that leaders of other Turkic states, Uyguri, Karluki, Kimaki, included hints of a connection with the sky in their titles. Titles like Tengri Khagan or Tengri Irig were known, which can be rendered as heavenly ruler or prince appointed by the sky. In addition to state ideology, archaeology also reveals the everyday religious aspect. In burials, amulets, mini-idols, and items for household rituals are found. All this indicates that Tengris customs were part of everyday life. People turned to the spirits of their ancestors, asked for protection on journeys, and thanked the sky for rain or a successful hunt. When the Mongol Empire rapidly expanded across Eurasia in the 13th century, Tengrism became something more than just the traditional religion of the nomads. Chinggis Khan and his inner circle turned it into a universal idea that explained why the Mongols had the right to conquer half the world. At its core, there was still a simple belief: Tengri gives power and takes it away. But now this was applied not only to the internal affairs of the clan or tribe, but to the entire known world. If the Khan wins, it means heaven wants him to rule the whole world. If the resisting kingdoms fall one after another, it means they are going against the will of Tengri. In the Mongolian chronicles, this idea sounds very straightforward. Chinggis Khan is not just a strong ruler. He is the one chosen by the heavens, and to whom the heavens open the way from China to Europe. Moreover, Mongolian rulers actively used Tengriist rhetoric in diplomacy. Letters from Guyuk and Hulagu to European kings and the Pope have survived, in which the Mongols directly call Tengri the sole ruler of Europe. They demand submission by the will of heaven. It is also interesting that Tengrism became very tolerant during the era of the empire. The Mongols did not require conquered peoples to change their faith. The main thing was that they recognized the authority of the Khan, given by Tengri. That is why Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and Tengriists coexisted within the vast empire. At the same time, the ideology itself was flexibly adapted to local traditions. In China, Mongol rulers easily combined the ideas of Tengri with the Buddhist image of the universal ruler Chakravartin. And some Turkic Mongol dynasties even combined shamanic rituals with Islamic or Christian practices. As a result, in the 13th century, Tengrism had become an imperial religion, even though the Mongols did not formally impose it on anyone. By the 13th and 14th centuries, the world of the Turks and Mongols began to change rapidly. Tengrism started to be displaced by other religions, but this transition happened gradually and differently in each region. For the Turks, the adoption of Islam happened step by step. At first, it was accepted by merchants and the military nobility. Later, entire tribal unions converted. Islam provided new political connections, new laws, access to education and written culture. It gradually became a part of state life. And when the rulers converted to Islam, ordinary nomads followed their example. Nevertheless, old customs did not disappear immediately. Many Turks continued to preserve rituals related to ancestors, fire, and local spirits for a long time. They simply coexisted alongside the new religion. The Mongols had a different path. Here, Tibetan Buddhism had a greater influence. It turned out to be flexible and was able to adopt local traditions without breaking them. Buddhist teachers acknowledged the existence of spirits in the steppe and included them in their cosmology, turning them into protectors of the teachings. This made the transition more natural. When Altan Khan formed an alliance with the third Dalai Lama, Buddhism became an important pillar of political power, and shamanic practices gradually faded into the background. As a result, Tengrism began to give way to world religions not because it was defeated, but because the world around it changed. The new states needed writing, laws, and a unified ideology, which Islam and Buddhism provided. The nomadic way of life also began to change, and along with it, the spiritual culture changed as well. But even when Tengrism disappeared as an independent faith, its elements remained alive. The veneration of ancestors, respect for nature, belief in local spirits, and rituals connected with fire and water continued to exist in people's daily lives for many centuries. And in some places to this day. In the north, among the Altaians, Kakas, Tuvans, Saka, and other peoples of Siberia, beliefs connected with Tengrism were preserved for an amazingly long time. People continued to communicate with the spirits of the land, make offerings to fire, honor their ancestors, and seek help from shamans. These practices were often described as shamanism, but in essence, they were a continuation of that very ancient spiritual system, where a person lives in a world full of powers and entities with which one must maintain harmony. When the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union tried to replace local beliefs with new ideologies, they achieved a lot, but not everything. In the 20th century, shamanic rituals were persecuted, sacred places were destroyed, and traditions were declared superstition. However, it was impossible to completely destroy them. People continued to observe the rituals in secret, passed them down within families, and preserved them as part of their identity. After the collapse of the USSR, interest in Tengrism grew again. For some peoples, it became a way to remember their own past. For others, it was an attempt to find spirituality that was not connected to major religions or the Soviet legacy. Public movements, art projects, and music groups appeared that used ancient motifs. Tengrism is no longer a full-fledged religion, but its influence is hard to overestimate. It shaped the character of the steppe peoples, determined how they saw power, the land, the sky, and themselves. To understand Tengrism means to better understand the history of the Turkic and Mongol peoples, to understand why they built their states the way they did, and why they valued freedom, kin, and honor so much, and why even today their cultures still retain the sense of that vast open world under the sky of Tengri, always watching over everyone. That's all from me. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye, everyone.